Good evening, everybody. This is Christopher, or C1, coming to you from The Christopher Show. And today I want to talk about a couple of things in regards to the election. I want to talk to you about the pollsters as of late. I want to talk to you about the groundwork being done by both campaigns. I want to talk to you about better polls. And then I want to talk to you about election chaos that I anticipate coming forth. So I'm going to go through this in the next few minutes, try to keep it short, try to keep it simple. And with that, we'll get into the pollsters. I feel like the pollsters right now are afraid to commit one way or the other, whether it's to Trump or to Kamala. And we've seen where the polls initially showed, I think it initially showed Trump was leading when Kamala first entered. Then all of a sudden, the Democrat machine got behind her. And all of a sudden, Kamala was leading. She was leading for a while. And then she began to lose her momentum, and Trump began to shift in there. And he began to come ahead in the polls. Now, I think that the reason that the polls are non-committal at this point, meaning that most of them are within 1 or 2 points, and they go, oh, and that's within the plus or minus margin of error of 3.4% or whatever. So they're giving you like 47%, 48%. And what that allows them to do is to kind of finagle the numbers when the election's finally done, so they can go, oh, what was within the margin of error. What that means is basically they could say that if it goes as high as 51% for Kamala, and 45% for Trump, and then the other percentage is going to Stein and Oliver and those other people, they can go, oh, well, we were still right because we still said it was within the margin of error. I think polls have gotten a little non-committal or a little scared of committing to something because of what happened in 2016 when Trump defeated the polls and actually showed that he beat Hillary at the time. And then in 2020, obviously the polls are going back and forth and you had people disliking the polls. So you have this reputation thing going on with the polls, and they're trying not to lose the reputation. Now, I will say there's Alan Lichtman who talks about the 13 keys. I don't agree with his 13 keys being set in stone. I don't agree with them being as accurate as they are. It is a one-person poll to me. If you have keys that you're flipping left or right and you say, oh, it needs to be six or more keys means that the other party wins or whatever. If you're telling me that, what it means is it's a one-person poll that determines subjectively, because he says he's objective because he's a historian or whatever he wants to claim to be. In my mind, I don't see the logic behind a one-person poll, because all of us are taking into account everything that's going on, whether it's the economy, whether it's the inflation, whether it's gas prices, or whatever's happening. We're all taking something into account. And war in Ukraine and Russia, things like that. So we all do that subjectively, and he's no better than the rest of us. He is a victim of subjectivity as well. I've seen him flip keys one way or the other that I thought could have gone the other way based on some of the questions. So getting back to the pollsters, he's actually committed. Like, he's one of the few people. So I will say this. He's one of the few people that have committed. He has picked Kamala Harris. There's a big part of me that's hoping that Trump wins so that he can be proven wrong, and so that his 13 keys lose some respect, because I think that they are overinflated for how valuable those things are. Then you have Nate Silver, who's doing a consolidation of polls and trying to tell you who's winning. They both are Democrats, and so they try to remove their bias. I'll give them that. But at the end of the day, they both have their own personal bias, and so they want their candidate to win. So their polls still kind of reflect that. And even Nate Silver's not sure who's going to win at this point, but he's at least doing a consolidation of polls. And I find that to be more accurate than what Alan Lichtman's is, which is really just a poll of one person where he asks himself, well, what do I think about this topic? Oh, I'm going to flip it to the right. Well, you can't do that. It has to go through a lot of scrutiny. And that's why we have peer reviews when you talk about case studies, because one person can be subjective and they can impose their bias on a survey. But when you have 10 people, all of a sudden you begin to remove some of that bias, and you can get peers to actually counteract some of what you're putting into your bias. So if you really wanted to make that fair, put 10 people on those keys and let 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, or 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 2 independents decide which way they would flip those keys. That removes some of the subjectivity. That removes some of the bias. Then I can accept that poll. I can't accept it when Alan Lichtman says he's the polling god or the 13 keys god. I'm like, get out of here with that stuff. So anyway, moving on. I think some of the reason the pollsters don't want to commit as well is also strategy. So when they said that it was going to be a landslide for Hillary Clinton in 2016, all of a sudden Republicans rushed to the polls, they voted, they got out there, and it changed the dynamics of that election. It literally slanted it, and then Trump wound up winning, as we all saw. So pollsters know that they had an impact at one point. They're losing that respectability, though, because of how wrong they were in 2016. Then 2020, it was a little wishy-washy. And so I get the feeling that they are just, they say that it's 48, 48, 48, 47, 49, 48, and they're keeping the numbers around there so that regardless of who wins, they can say that their poll was within the margin of error. That's a complete theory on my part. It's not, there's nothing I have to validate that. It's a gut feeling. I've done data analytics for 25 years. So for me, when I see these polls being done, I at least understand some of the logic behind them. I even took finance in college, so I had some statistics classes in college as well. I did Lean Six Sigma for a little bit. So I understand some of the methodology those polls are using and why they're doing that. Moving from polls over to the Bettors pools, there are Bettors pools, odds checker. I keep going there to see what that's been like over the last 2 months. I've been watching that kind of closely. I've also been monitoring the poly market stuff. And what I had seen lately over the last couple of weeks is Trump had ran up. His momentum had pushed him up on odds checker. He got up as high as negative 185, minus 185, which means he's the favorite to win. Kamala was down about plus 180. And then poly market, I think I saw him get as high as 66%, and Kamala was at 34% chance of winning. So it was slanted so heavily toward Trump. And what these are is they're Bettors markets. And so at some point, people start hedging their bets. So a lot of people bet on Trump, and the odds just kept going further in his favor, which means that now all of a sudden, if you're betting $100 on Kamala, you could get $186 back if she wins. And the same thing when Trump was at plus 126. Trump was actually at plus 126 at the height on the other side where he was not the favorite, and then it curled and it pushed him to the favorite a lot over the last several weeks. So now what's happened is since the Bettors pools had pushed so far in favor of Trump, that now people are hedging their bets and they're starting to slide some in there toward Kamala. And what I saw just before I got on the air is I saw that poly market's down 53 to 47%. So it's gone from a high of 66% Trump favorite down to 53% Trump favorite for winning the election. And then in the same breath, I looked at odds checkers, and I think that it had dropped from minus 180 down to about 126 for Trump. And I think Kamala was still hanging at about 150, 145. So that's what's going on with the Bettors polls right now. I also want to speak about the groundwork being done by both campaigns. I'm a Trump supporter through and through. I'm MAGA through and through. But I have to acknowledge there's a lot of work being done by the Harris campaign to bring people in. She's going after the celebrity endorsements, and the beautiful thing that I've seen about celebrity endorsements is they're not working like they used to. She's brought in LeBron. She's brought in J-Lo. Those two people have been attached to P. Diddy through various things in the past. Obviously, the whole P. Diddy thing that's going on. And then Mark Cuban came out the other day, and he made a statement as well. When Mark spoke, he said something about Trump doesn't like to surround himself with intelligent women. We've all been watching Trump for 8 years. Kayleigh McEnany, Alina Habba, so many beautiful, intelligent women have been surrounding Trump. As strong women, independent women. Like I respect him a lot for the number of intelligent women he has around him. So Mark said that statement, which is clearly false. And then all of a sudden it was, and Tulsi Gabbard, I mean, who's in his camp. And she went from Democrat to being Republican. Wonderful person. And so you have all these beautiful, intelligent women around Trump. And Mark Cuban makes a statement like that, and all of a sudden he's getting slammed for it. Misogynistic, whatever. I was watching X and seeing what was happening and transpiring on X, and there were women that were just lighting him up and calling him out for his statements. So the Harris campaign asked Mark Cuban, they're like, hey, stop speaking on behalf of the campaign. Don't do that anymore, because of how much negative exposure he got for that. Well, then Trump had a rally, and there are missteps by both campaigns, and it's the recovery. But the media, the chaos, the strength with which they put messages forward is intense. And so what I noticed on not just X, but on ABC, CBS, NBC, Newsweek, Bloomberg, Forbes, when Trump makes a mistake, they all scream it at the top of their lungs as loud as they can. And so Trump had a great rally in Madison Square Garden. He had one individual who made some statements that were kind of questionable. It's a guy that's normally a roast artist anyway, and he made a joke that was in poor taste, but that's the nature of the business with comics and the way they do things. You take a little bit of a risk when you have them speak. And I mean, the guy's a great guy. I don't think he's a racist. I've seen him do a lot of roast. I've been watching his stuff. It's Kill Tony. great roast stuff that he has, just a poor joke, and the delivery didn't go over so well with a lot of the people. And then Democrats started talking about how he had called Puerto Rico garbage. Well, that would have been fine if it got so loud it was deafening that they were coming forth like that. Well, then the next day, Biden decides that he wants to respond because he's trying to support the Kamala Harris campaign. And so he comes out, he comes on TV, and he goes, the only garbage I see are his supporters, speaking about President Trump's supporters. Now, it would have been one thing if he had actually said that and then they went forward with that, but the stenographer actually was asked to change the transcript of what Biden said. And so that gained publicity, that gained exposure, and all of a sudden, the next thing you know, there's now a landslide from the right on the amount of stuff that's talking about Biden having called all of the Trump supporters garbage. Trump capitalized on the moment. He went and rented a garbage truck and put the Trump sign on the side of it and then drove it around as he was going to another rally. So you have both campaigns that are making these ground maneuvers back and forth. Kamala's going after the women, but then you also have Kamala who's saying one message in front of Muslims and then another message in front of Jews, and she's speaking to both of them, and you hear about the flip-flopping of Kamala, and it's a prime example of that because she's supportive of both of them and making it sound like she's going to basically resolve the issues in favor of that group of people. So she's doing that. As far as Trump, he's been on Joe Rogan, Theo, Vaughn. I saw that Kamala Harris is on Saturday Night Live tonight. So you have a lot of things that are happening in these ground campaigns, and we have 3 days to go. Actually, we're down to about 60 hours left before the election day officially begins, obviously 8 a.m. on Tuesday. And so there's going to be a lot of activity on Sunday, a lot of activity on Monday, and then Tuesday the race starts, the votes start getting tabulated, and by Tuesday night, we're not going to know the winner, is my prediction. I was talking about pollsters earlier. I refuse to make a prediction because I've been watching social media, and I see strong messages from supporters of both sides, and I see a vast quantity of messages from supporters of both sides. I check across the media spans, ABC, CBS, like all the news outlets that I mentioned earlier, in addition to Fox. I glance at all of them to see what's going on from the commenting stance so that I can see what kind of defenses are being mounted and things like that. So I refuse to say who's going to win. I don't think it's going to be close with whoever wins. I think that the Electoral College is going to be a big margin of victory for whichever side wins because they're both putting out such strong messages. Again, MAGA, Trump 2024, I'm pulling for him, and I want him to win, but there's a lot to come still. Early voting, I do want to say that that's been going on, a lot of that. And the cool thing is I think that there are record numbers on early voting. So I don't know what those numbers are yet. I'm going to try to look into those and see how we're getting. But I do know that the media is reporting that there are record numbers of those. The other thing that's happening is I saw Georgia, Brad Raffensperger on TV earlier today. He was speaking about election integrity. A video came out the other day from Haitians who said that they had only been here for 6 months. They applied for driver's license and they were voting. They immediately investigated that really quickly, found out that it was misinformation. So there are things out there that are going to be coming out that people are putting out. We keep saying that Russia is doing this disinformation. Let me say this. It's not just Russia. It is Americans who are doing this as well on both sides of the aisle. They're trying to create these misinformation campaigns. So we can blame other nations, but the reality is it is happening en masse here. And you see it because of things like the Liz Cheney statement that President Trump made the other day. He was saying that she's a war hawk. She's a warmonger. If you put her on the field and give her a gun and she has 9 guns pointed at her, she's not going to want to take that, but she's more than willing to put our soldiers in harm's way. That was the full context, the full scope of what was said. What made it to mainstream media on the liberal side was he said he wanted to put her in front of an execution squad. He absolutely did not say that. What he said is she would not go to war to fight, but she's more than willing to send our soldiers to war to fight. Trump doesn't want war. He wants to resolve the wars that we have. I pray he gets in because I know that when he does, he's going to look at the Ukraine war, he's going to look at the Israel war, and he's going to try to bring those to closure rather quickly. With that, I am going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for listening today, and have a wonderful weekend. See you on Tuesday.